Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, it's great to be here with you all. I've been hearing about your Sangha for some time. Ward also did this program, and my practice took a tremendous leap around this. It's like the American Buddhism has been so great, the contribution that it's made, and part of it is how many women are involved. Don't get me started on this, but there's so much more juice and compassion in the practice than the harsh early training we got that came out of Asia. I mean, people found their way and we found our way, but I didn't want to study. Leave me alone, I want to practice. But it turns out that this Dharma study was really a fabulous accompaniment to my own development. Many people have walked this path over 2,600 years or so. So it's, how about let's benefit from their experience? Okay. And so that's what I hope to do here. So that we're going to focus on habits. Habits is a beautiful window into the practice because it's all about that. It's all about, can we be conscious of how we are right now in this moment, which often we aren't. Okay, so I'm going to, that'll be our focus. And I'll talk about the Buddhist path, the path that the Buddha outlined, give us sort of a brief overview of it. And then I'm going to focus on one of the path factors, which is right intention. And we'll go into that as a focus for tonight, and hopefully have a couple of experiences along the way. A lot of this, me just yammering on, is going to be less valuable than you all having an experience or two. And so I'm hoping for that. So, okay, so the Buddha said, I teach one thing and one thing only, and that is suffering and the end of suffering. Okay. So our habits, looking into our habits, allows us to see how suffering operates. Now, our habits aren't all bad, and they actually are us, right? And we depend on them. And they're, to one degree or another, wholesome or unwholesome. I'll use this term a lot. Wholesome means healthy. Unwholesome means unhealthy, but also wholesome means moving toward freedom, and unwholesome means moving toward suffering. So hopefully we'll understand what suffering is and how it works, and then we can make some better choices. Stephen Covey, who wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he drew a very important distinction between liberty and freedom, which we use synonymously in this country. But with this is what he said, see what you think. Liberty is having many options. It's a condition of the environment. Freedom is having the inner power to exercise those options. It's a condition of the person. It's a really important distinction. So I want to give you a little bit of I'm going to tell you a little story of my journey. This happened in sometime last December. I was on retreat at the Forest Refuge, which is one of the meditation centers in Barre, Mass. And the context was my son had been traveling a lot, many different places, and my wife Nancy was going to be there when he came, and was quite nervous about, where's he been? How's it going to be to have him in the house? And certainly I was sympathetic to this, but I wasn't going to be there. And that really stirred me up. Right. Now I'll talk to, in the end, they worked it out. It was just fine. But I was leaving and I was feeling out of control with this situation when I arrived on my retreat. Also, I've been in a major life transition because this position, which I held for 23 years as medical director of a program, had ended. I was working less. That was good. See, you're going to hear a lot about pluses and minuses. It was good to work less. I had more time with Nancy. I had more time to do things I wanted to do. It was more spacious, could sleep more. But I also was having this sense of vulnerability, that I had, through in my own way, through various, some of you may relate to this, that I had been able to outrun for years through busyness, ambition, and pressure, moving fast. Well, once I started slowing down, I started feeling a lot more. So, and here I'm going away, and I was all stirred up. So I spoke to the teacher, and she said, "You need to get out and get some exercise." Right? This was my meditation instruction from my teacher first time. And I thought, all right. So I got out in the woods. I've been there many times. I love this. And I started walking. And I started feeling better almost right away. Now, this was symptom relief because I was moving and I was channeling the anxiety into movement. It's energy. It's a good thing to do, actually. And I was starting to feel better. But then I started to notice something else. I started to notice that sort of the mechanics of walking. How many people here have done walking meditation? Right, okay, so most of you have. I'd like you to try this for a moment. Listen, I'm going to invite you all to stand up. I just want to demonstrate something or have you experience something. I'll shift the camera just a little bit. So, so you can't see my legs really, but let's all just stand evenly balanced over our feet. Okay. Just notice that. So now, if you want to take a step, what's the first thing you have to do? Anybody? I'm sorry, say again? Yes, that's right. So let's do that. All right. So I'll go to my right, you go to your left, just for argument's sake. So just start shifting your weight and then get to the point where you think you could take another step. All right. What do you notice as you get to the end of that? Well, you may be, but let's stay in balance. All right. So just walking. So right, you're going too far. This is why I can't play golf. It's why because I get too far enough. So yeah, just gently move the weight over so you're ready. You're in balance, but you're ready to take another step. What do you notice right at the end of that movement? I'm sorry? On your... You're on your weight-bearing foot, and where on your weight-bearing foot are you? Well, yeah, initially, but if you notice, if you keep going, the hip turns slightly. Notice that? There's a little bit of a turn so that you're pouring your weight over to the front of your foot, that's correct. And then it sort of turns to the back of your foot. Well, I started to notice this, that my wife and I have taken some Qigong classes. We've done this kind of thing where the weight pours from side to side. See, we're trying to go forward, but we don't walk like this. We walk more like this. And I noticed I shifted my weight and then I push off and then I land on, just as you said, the front of my foot, and then it go to the back and then forward. Try that. You can just try that. It's like a figure 8 motion. It's really fundamental to motion. The heel to the opposite ball of the foot or toe, to the heel, to the opposite foot. It's a sort of figure 8. Well, I started to notice this, and this was really interesting. And particularly I liked that when I got to the end, I felt an experience. A phrase came to me, balance and power. That's just what came to me. I felt really balanced, and I felt, because the hip and the knee and the ankle and the heel just line up and then you just push them. Okay, great. So that was the experience now. And so I was feeling this was beyond just the motion. This was like, I was feeling this kind of groove and this sort of foundation. It was like a flow. And once I was familiar with that feeling, I knew when it was present and when it wasn't. And so I would try to reestablish it in various ways. Now you can do that with your breathing, or you obviously the walking, you could do it with your breathing, you could do it with the phrases that I said. I mean, there's a number of ways of doing it. But if I couldn't always reestablish it, but I could see how I was relating to that. So if I felt destabilized, I could see, was I ignoring it, avoiding it, trying to outrun it, right? Was I trying to get rid of it or outthink it? The kinds of things I do, right? I would just see it. Or was I pausing? Was I taking an interest in it, investigating, turning to my breath, bringing a friendly attitude? I could see which one I was doing. And so I was able to begin to see that mind states like fear and doubt and judgment and comparison arise under certain conditions. And my task was to meet them with balance and with kindness. So my habit, if you haven't guessed already that I'm talking about, is more of a mental habit, right? To analyze, to know, to worry, and then to give some guidance or help as a way of regaining control, right? Now, this is mostly good. I made a living at it, incidentally, right? I mean, there's a lot of good in it, right? It's not all bad, right? But there's a certain part of it that wasn't good, right? That was all this knowing and helping it has its limitations. I mean, if you really want to know about it, you can speak to my wife after class and she'll tell you the downside of this. Because what I begin to see is that some of my knowing and helping was for me. Now, maybe people even got help. I don't know. I mean, well, many of them do, right? But I realized that a lot of it was for me, so I could feel better. Now, there's our habits are often a way to get a sense of pleasure or balance or control. It's often why we're doing it, right? So that's not all bad, right? Now, there's a neuroscientist called Judd Brewer. He's also a meditation teacher, who wrote a book called Unwinding Anxiety. And the point that he makes is that anxiety comes in habit loops, right? There's a trigger, there's a behavior, and there's a reward. Now, this is true of any habit, right? So in my case, the trigger was my anxiety not knowing what was going to be, right? The behavior was my worrying and analyzing and thinking and whatever. And the reward was, well, what's the reward for worrying? Well, often it's, or helping, often it's, or knowing, worry and knowing, let's say. It's like, I'm doing something about it. I'm figuring it out. Or maybe even, I'm a good person. See that? So that's the reward. But if we look closely, which we don't, that's the point often of these habits, that it's a way of avoiding our experience. These rewards are really short-lived. They're really transitory, and they really aren't, they certainly don't bring happiness, and they're not even enduring. So I'd like you to have an experience of this as well. There's an infinite number of habits of body, speech, and mind. They're things we do or ingest, right? There's things that we say, and there's things that we think, habits of mind, right? So I'm going to invite you all to bring to mind a habit of yours, right? It may not be your worst one, but something will come to mind that you probably are at least thinking about it being you may not be ready to change it, right? But you might be saying, I should really look at that. I should think about that kind of thing. So just allow that to come to mind, whatever it is. Right? And I'm going to then guide you through 4 questions. And those are, what's the plus and minus of your habit? What's good about it? What's not good about it? And then if you could let it go, what would be good and not good about that? All right. So let's try this. So go ahead and go inside and bring this habit to mind, whatever it is. And initially, just ask yourself, what is good about this? Why do I do this? What do I like about it? How does it help me? How does it give me a sense of identity? What's pleasurable? Don't yes, but yourself. Just be with, yeah, what's the benefit of this to me? How is it working for me? Okay, and so now you can go to the other side. What's not so good about this? What is potentially problematic about it if I keep doing it? How might it create problems in my life, problems in my relationships, problems in my, for my work or my livelihood, problems potentially for my health or for my mental health? You know, how do I not feel so good about this or about myself when I do it? Okay. All right, now the third question is, say you could not do this or change it significantly. Now, you may not be ready to do it. That's okay. But just say you were able to make the change that you'd like to make or that you might be helpful. What would be good about that? How would you be different in a positive way? How might your energy be different? How might you feel better or feel better about yourself? How might you sleep better or just feel freer in some way? Okay, and then say you got all those benefits, right? What would be difficult? What would be hard to do? Or what would you miss about your habit? Or what would be painful about letting it go or saying goodbye to it? Having it not be in your life in the usual ways. Okay, so just letting those all be in their boxes, right? Right. And time limits us here, but let me just ask, what did you get from that? What did you learn from that? I mean, some people like to share their habit, but I'm not asking for that now. Actually, in the workshop, if any of you are coming to the workshop on Saturday, I think we'll do this in a little more detail. But just note, you might notice for yourself, how did that help me, or what did I get from looking at my habit that way? And maybe we'll talk about it toward the end, if you're so moved. So now, again, we get a reward. We get a pleasant feeling. We get rid of a painful feeling, or we escape. But then we wind up suffering, right? Then if we take charge of it, we do better, but then there's some pain in that. There's some pain in change, all right? So let me just say, I mean, I would love to ask you and talk about it, but I think for time, I'm just going to say the difference between pain and suffering is a very important difference. And I'm going to give you my version of it. Pain is, it's unpleasant or it hurts. Okay. Suffering is, get me out of here. I can't stand this. I want it to be different. All right. Now, you may or may not agree with me, but that's how I see it, and that is kind of the underpinnings. And I'm glad to talk about that if you see it a different way. So now, the Buddha was particularly interested in suffering. The Buddha was a prince. He had everything. He had all pleasures and entertainments. His father was a king, didn't want him to see anything bad. but he could see it was not going anywhere. And he actually left his wife and son and went out to learn about this. It's quite a remarkable thing. And this is what he learned. This is what he learned on the night of his enlightenment, what's called the Four Noble Truths. 1, there is suffering. It's part of life. Can we understand it? The second is the cause of suffering is craving, and it can take the form of clinging, pushing away, or just zoning out. All right. It's our nature. We're hardwired for this. We're hardwired to seek pleasure and avoid pain. It's just built in. But it's often not seen. Okay. The third noble truth is there's a way out. There's an alternative. A treatment, you might call it. The Buddha was called the great physician. There is a treatment for this. What supports the heart's freedom in the face of experience? That pain's inevitable, but misery or suffering is optional. Okay. And the fourth noble truth is the way, the Noble Eightfold Path. So there are 8 factors, and they come in 3 categories. This is fairly brief, but just to give you a sense of it. The 3 categories are wisdom, ethics, and concentration or meditation. Those are the 3 categories. And the first, the wisdom section has 2 parts. Two of the factors: right view and right intention. All right. Right view is, see, we need just enough wisdom to open to maybe there's another way. Right? I had no idea what I was doing when I first came to this, but I just had some intuition that I needed something. I didn't even know what. So that wasn't much, right? But then just enough initial interest. Some of you, I appreciate, are here, raised your hands, you're new. Just some initial interest to look beyond our natural tendencies to grasp, avoid, and ignore. Right. And once we see even little glimpses of some freedom or letting go, then we're encouraged to do more. The Buddha said, don't take my word for it. Check it out. And I'm saying the same thing. So, I taught in prison for 2 years. That's how I trained to be a mindfulness teacher. And these guys, they weren't looking for Buddhism. They were getting good time for being in the class. But once they saw something, this one young guy, he just came to me after class 5. He hadn't been totally dismissive, but he'd been kind of like whatever. He said, I had nothing to do. I sat down. I had this tremendous pain in my neck. I sat down in my cell on my bed, and I just breathed right into my belly, and the pain went away. Well, I didn't have to convince him any longer that he had seen that something had happened, something of value had happened. So he was encouraged to do more. So anyway, wise view is the origin of the path, and it supports wise intention, right? Which I'll go into a bit more detail in a bit. It's really wise thought. It precedes action. And so the next part is, the ethical part is wise speech, wise action, wise livelihood. That's where a lot of our habits reside. And so wise intention supports those. And then if these our behaviors are in line with our deeper values, then it's easier to still the mind. Right effort, mindfulness, right concentration. If we've just ordered a drone strike or committed insurance fraud, it may be difficult to still the mind, right? Okay. But if we're living well, and if we're making small corrections in how we're living, it tends to go in a better direction. So, all right, so there are 3 wise intentions, right? And they are renunciation, goodwill, and harmlessness. All right, I'll go through them. So renunciation, and there are three unwise intentions. So I'll make reference to those. Renunciation counteracts the unwise intention of sensual desire. All right. Now, I just want to say, desire isn't bad. In fact, desire is what lights up the world. It lights up our lives. It's like it stimulates us to do things of value. Okay. The problem is not or that we enjoy a good meal. There's nothing wrong with that, right? That's great. The problem is when we begin to see that these forms of gratification as a means of happiness. I think we see pretty quickly that these things are to be enjoyed, but as soon as we begin to cling to them, we have a problem. Okay, so renunciation. The question is, can we relate with wisdom to this, right? And see when we're clinging: food, sex, drugs, social media, shopping, work. How are we utilizing these things? And if we're seeking happiness through them, we likely are going to be disappointed. So the intention here is to live simply and to see when we're not. See when we're grasping, rushing in our heads and not connecting with others or with our own experience. Okay, to begin to see that, right? See, my example that I learned on my retreat, sort of, it wasn't like I was pristine in all my thinking and behavior, but I was seeing more clearly when I wasn't there, when I was off, when I was obsessing or upsetting myself. There's a young guy. He's early middle age in my practice, and his problem was chewing tobacco. I kind of like that I'm in North Carolina and I have a tobacco exemption. But anyway, this began when he was 14, and it was a vehicle for him he felt kind of put upon by his parents, and this is a vehicle for his sort of coming out. And there was a real peer experience. He's a musician, and he loved it, and he did it all these years. But now he's married, a little on the late side, but he's doing fine, and he's a really nice partner, and they have a baby, and he doesn't want to do this anymore, right? But it's hard. It's hard because he gets a lot of pleasure from it, and also if he's like coming home from a gig late at night, it wakes him up. So, but I'll go through the same questions I went through with you guys. He doesn't feel good about it. And he can't get life insurance. And he has to lie to his wife. And he doesn't want to, but he's sneaky. He doesn't like that, right? Now, when he lets it go, he feels better about himself, but it's a big loss, right? So this is what he's grappling. So when we work with this, it doesn't work to gratify. Clearly, it doesn't work. I've already said it. It doesn't work to gratify these things. It also doesn't work to repress them, because the energy of resistance just builds, and then it just kind of breaks through. Anyone who's tried to be good or have a New Year's resolution or go on a diet, this doesn't work, right? Too much deprivation. So what do we do? So the remedies that come to mind for me are slowing down and bringing attention to the habit loops in the way I'm talking. What triggers me? What am I doing? What's the result? If we could begin to see that, we'll begin to see. I don't want to do it now, but there's a book by Bhikkhu Bodhi called The Noble Eightfold Path. It's really quite a beautiful little book, and he has a passage in here about what he calls the cycle of desire. The idea that desire is shadowed by suffering at all turns. There's no getting away from it. And I'll read this at the end if we have time. So slowing down and looking and seeing that neither indulgence nor repression really work. Now, and learning how to soften to the resistance, because we get very resistant and damn it, I'm angry. Be angry, it's okay. It's okay. Feel put upon, troubled. Bring kindness to that. That helps. And as I suggested before, contemplate the suffering that's inherent in the desire, the fear and the sorrow that comes on the heels of desires that aren't met and that are. Because now, if they are met, now we got to keep our status. We got to keep it going, right? We don't want to lose it, right? Well, there's suffering in that. And eventually, contemplating the benefits of renunciation, because as we let go, there's greater sense of fearlessness, there's joy, there's greater concentration, and so the seeds of wisdom. Okay. Now the second is goodwill, and that counteracts the unwise intention of ill will, anger, irritability, resentment, things like that. You may notice that we're not always open or kind. Right? Have you noticed that? Now, in our behavior, but also in our minds, right? And so we want to be right. We retaliate when we're attacked, or internally, right? We're inconsiderate. We shut down. We just don't care, right? So we become entrenched in our perspective. We stop really listening, right? So, but if we can notice that, and this is something I'm doing a lot, and I really recommend it to you. A question: am I in goodwill or ill will right now? I found this so helpful. And what I would say is, this is my suggestion: if you're in ill will, don't do much, right? Don't speak or act from that place, because it's not going to go well. Right? Now, if you do, that's okay, because now you see it didn't go well. See, it's all right. You don't have to be perfect, right? Right? See, you're going to blow it like I do, right? But it's all right. Okay, so you ask that question, right? And if it's the former, if it's ill will, then just do something to get to. This is part of why I did the meditation I did. I really want people to have a chance to reset, to notice, and when you're off, and reset and be kind, right? So then you can come to neutral, right? And then you have a shot. So then you can pause, you can embody, you can open to what's out there and what's inside, and then you can really listen. And then you might even own your part in a problem, whether it's in a relationship or whether it's something that you just keep doing that's hard to change and that you just keep seeing. Okay, and then the practice, the metta practice, the loving kindness practice. See, the metta, which I led you in, it's not based on sensual love or personal affection. It's more about unconditional friendliness, right? And so when we build kindness toward ourselves, I mean, we can send it to others, but it's really for our own hearts. Others may feel it, but it's really more for our heart. And once we build this kindness toward ourselves, it counteracts our negative attitudes, often unconscious, toward ourselves and our self-judgments, and allows us to see our own aspirations to be happy and well. And then, by extension, to identify with others who want the same thing. I mean, the Buddha said, noble friends is the whole practice. Now, this is interesting because it's, just check it out as we connect with others. In the addiction community, they call it recovery. We're not alone. So this is the antidote to ill will. And so then, actually, with this patient of mine, I invited him to focus on his experience. How you doing? He said, oh God, grumpy, irritable. I said, all right, are you having ill will or goodwill? I knew the answer. He says, God, a lot of ill will. So I led him through a little practice like this, like I did with you guys. And I asked him, well, what did you notice? And he said, I did it because I trust you. The implication was, this is ridiculous. I did it because I trust you. He said it was hardest doing for myself. It was easier for his son and his wife, and for a neutral person. But he felt better. He was calmer. He was more centered. He was more balanced. And he saw that around changing his tobacco habit, that if he cultivated this, he would be more patient and balanced toward himself and toward his challenges. And he could then just be more interested and open to possibility as opposed to so judgmental. So, okay, so now harmlessness is the third. It counteracts the unwise intention of harmfulness, right? So this is really about being a decent person, right? To a large extent. There are 5 precepts for lay people. And the first one is not killing, right? Now, it's not so hard for us to not kill people, other people. But these aren't commandments. These are contemplations, invitations to contemplate killing. So we might be a bit more careful about killing insects, for example, or plants, or we might be careful about killing time, or maybe killing the opportunity for a good interaction. We might be more aware of how am I shutting down to experience as opposed to opening to it, right? So can we remember our ethics to not cause harm in situations, right? And so, and then beyond this, this harmlessness, or you might call it compassion, is about turning loving kindness, metta, towards suffering. So this person who, like me, is suffering, old age, sickness, fear of death, sorrow, grief, despair, may you be free from suffering. Okay. So this takes practice now, okay? And it's gradual. It doesn't change right away. Somebody who's trying to play the piano or play golf or knit, build any kind of a skill, you don't have it right away, but with practice, you begin to develop greater, what you might call stability, flexibility, confidence. And then some of the unwholesome factors like self-judgment and doubt start fading a bit. They don't take center stage. They don't shut down the whole process. Doubt is very dangerous because it shuts the whole thing down. Oh, why even do this? Why even bother? Okay. So we would begin to notice that, and with greater sensitivity, our unwholesome habits start becoming less satisfying and harder to justify, right? And we just lose interest in certain activities, in certain conversations, in certain thought patterns. We see it, they still do it, but we say, I don't want to be doing this. And then, but truth in advertising now, as something's dying and it hasn't been replaced yet, painful states may arise. Fear. This is kind of what I was talking about myself. I was in transition, right? Fear, disorientation, sadness, grief. You know, it's like, it's hard to change. This is part of why we don't change, right? And at the end of my retreat, there's an opportunity to talk in the library with other retreatants, and it was like I was with these guys. I was going to say kids. I could have been all their dad, but you know they were so open. It was so moving. And then I went for a walk. It was late in the day, and I felt sad, and I thank God didn't try to explain it, and I didn't pick up the pace. I didn't, because my way is to kind of move and, you know, really generate a lot of energy. I didn't. I just went fortunately I was warm enough, and I went slowly, and I just felt it. And I don't remember exactly what happened, but eventually it changed. That was a victory for me. All right, so Yeah, so wise intention allows us to tolerate these painful states and even see them as a vehicle for growth and for our development. All right. So, yeah, greater awareness of our actions and engagement, and to witness the seeds we're planting and the consequences down the road. How's this all working out? And it also, I said this before, it allows us to forget, to fail, to reset, and that builds self-compassion, which is so critical to the awakening mind. You know, they say two wings of the bird, wisdom and compassion. We really need both. Okay. So it's a unique path, each of us, to an unknown destination. It's quite an adventure, really. But we don't have to do it alone. And anyway, I appreciate your attention.